Okay, good morning, everyone. This is our final session for this semester. It's week 13, and we are on our third last week. Next week will be week 14 and then week 15. So we've concluded or gone through all the other topics or themes for this semester. We looked at security as a concept. We talked about the rise of China, and then we looked at cybersecurity. You did presentations on cybersecurity. And then we moved on to terrorism. And last week and this week, we've been talking about different contemporary security issues, from human smuggling to chemical weapons and environmental security, pollution of the environment. So this week we will continue on with our presenters. We started yesterday with our 3 presenters, and we have 4 presenters for this period. So Ms. Dennis will open the discussion and will share a presentation with us, an answer to the question on behalf of group number 4. So please, Ms. Dennis, go ahead.
Can you all hear me now? Okay, so the question that was assigned to my group number 4, the question reads, why is Guinea-Bissau labeled as a transshipment state by Williams? So before answering the question, let me define the term transshipment state and provide a background to the state Guinea-Bissau. Now, in order to understand a transshipment state, let's look at the root word transshipment. So according to an online dictionary, transshipment means, and I quote, the unloading of goods from one ship and its loading into another to complete a journey to a further destination, even when the cargo may have to remain ashore sometime before its onward journey, end of quote. So when it comes to transshipment state, it simply refers to a state that serves as a transit point of cargoes from one location to another, which is the case for Guinea-Bissau in this context. So before I state as to what type of cargoes are being transited through Guinea-Bissau and why the state is labeled as a transshipment state as stated by Williams, let me present a brief background of the state itself. So Guinea-Bissau is a former Portuguese colony located to the eastern edge of the African continent. Is a country of the African continent, which so the country is adjacent to the South America and is located east to North America, southeast to North America and Latin America, and is south of Europe. So a brief background into the state. So Guinea-Bissau became a full Portuguese colony in 1915. So between 1915 to 1956 and 1974, there's colonial policy of assimilation by the Portuguese government, where the locals were ought to practice and accept the Portuguese culture and standard. So there's also forced labor and exploitation of resources in the country. And most of the Africans were excluded from political, social, and economic rights. So there's continued resistance, and most of the citizens migrated to neighboring states, making it difficult for colonialists, especially the Portugal government, to secure workers other than forced labor. So those of the citizens that remain in the country were forced to do labors for the colonial government. And because of that, the attempts to transform traditional small-scale agricultural production and trade has failed. So in that period leading up to 1974, there's a lot of internal conflict resulting in political instability in the country. So in 1974, independence was granted to Guinea-Bissau by force because the locals does not want to be colonized by Portugal because of the unfair treatment. So this is according to Zedler 2011. However, because of the tension between Portugal as the colony and the locals, there is a lack of cooperation in development, resulting in poor social structures and specifically poor infrastructural developments. So this point can be supported by the International Crisis Group report 2018, which states that, and I quote, embryonic institutions created during the struggle against the colonizer were ill adapt to the post-colonial period, end of quote. Because by the time independence was granted in 1974, the leaders were confused where to begin because of the lack of experience in politics and leadership. So in the last 30 years, Guinea-Bissau has changed very little. Poverty is endemic and its human development indicators are at the bottom of the African League table. So civilian power is suffocated by personal animosity and the role of the armed forces in politics. So in the resulting chronic political instability, there has thus far been no glimpse of an end to the country's almost permanent state of crisis. So the failings of the national administration are practically the same as they were at the beginning of the independence and undermine the state's lack of institutionalization. So people, the citizens of the Guinea-Bissau tend to live independent from the government, and most basic services were provided to the people by non-government agencies. So from what I have presented, I expect you all to I know that you all have already seen the state, see that the state is vulnerable to internal as well as transnational crime because of its weak border protections. There's no established customs like what we have in here, PNG, we have customs and immigrations. The state is weak in those areas, so the borders are vulnerable to transnational crime. So this gives an advantage where the transnational organized crime operates in that gap between the state's ability to criminalize a certain activity and the ability to enforce it in the form of police and security forces. Now, when I say gap between the ability to criminalize and certain activity and the ability to enforce it, I mean, because most of the people who are involved in these transnational crimes, they are law enforcers. So there is a gap whether they will categorize that illegal activities as crimes or whether they will enforce it because they are taking, they are benefiting from these activities. So in a way, they're exploiting the state's weakness. So the rise of transnational organized crime in the 90s to the so this transnational organized crime links the rise of the organized crime in 1990s to the weakness of many states, which facilitates opportunities for criminal activities. So transitional states like Guinea-Bissau, who has been seen as a form of channel where illegal activities, especially drugs, are being passed through from South America to Latin America, North America, as well as towards Europe. So these states are vulnerable to general, they are vulnerable to transnational organized crime. So the characteristics of transnational states, transitional states, and of weak states in general provide for capacity gaps leading to functional holes. For example, a lack of capacity to control a state's border, as I've mentioned, which lead to weak interdiction of illegal products, which can be exploited by the transnational organized crime groups. So according to International Crisis Group Africa Report 2008, and I quote, the creation of a democratic state is increasingly urgent at the risk of criminalization, as the risk of criminalization is growing in Africa, and in this context, the state of Guinea-Bissau. So cocaine trafficking from Latin America has increased tremendously in recent years, and the country Guinea-Bissau has become a pivotal transit point in the road to European markets. So hundreds of kilograms of the drugs are estimated to pass through the state each week. So revenue from the illicit trade has already corrupted military leaders and political personalities, threatening the democratic process. Most of the political leaders, they're involved in the organizing of this crime. So they are benefiting in a way from the money that was received from the drugs and the cocaines. So to answer the question, why is Guinea-Bissau labeled as a transshipment state by Williams? The simplest answer I can say, apart from what I've presented, the simplest answer is Guinea-Bissau has become a facilitator of the global cocaine trade, where shipments from South America passes through its territory into Latin and North America, as well as into Europe. So some have categorized, some authors, they have categorized the state of Guinea-Bissau as a narco state, which simply means a country whose economy is dependent on the trade in illegal drugs. So most of what I've presented, you can see it outplay in our country today. As you replay it, or if you have paid close attention, you can pick up the points. Most of the context of the country, Guinea-Bissau, is similar to our country, from the history up to currently the political instability and the economic instability that we are facing today. So this particular country is on the verge of becoming a failed state. I am not sure about Papua New Guinea, where are we heading because of the instability that is going on. But that is my answer to question. Our answer, the first answer. Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dennis and Group 4. Very interesting answer, comprehensive. You gave us a background of the country itself and the economic state it is in, and then you point out that it's a transit point for cocaine coming from Latin America to European states. So as you mentioned, PNG is, you did the comparative analysis. PNG is kind of similar to Guinea-Bissau, and we are a buffer in between other major countries like China and Australia and New Zealand. So PNG recently has seen an increase in the drug trade. We read about cases on Budi Budi Island, Million Bay, and the recent drug heist in Port Moresby involving cocaine, the arrest of Jamie Peng and Anthony Yani in possession of millions of kina worth of methamphetamine. So it's a major worry. It's a really big security issue. So thank you for drawing the similarities and helping us to think critically about our country and where we're heading. PNG might be a narco state in the years to come if we do not police this part of or police drug trade, try to put in place strategies to deal with the trading, manufacturing, producing, and distribution of drugs like cocaine, methamphetamine, and marijuana in the country and to other markets. The largest market in the region, Australia and New Zealand. We now move on to Mr. Tauri Veve. Caro will share with us his answer representing group number 5. So, Caro, please go ahead.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? So my group and I working on the question 5 of the week. The question reads, the question reads, why did William label the trafficking of women as the most serious threat to individual security? So, as we brings with the task to find, so we went on to search other relevant articles to women trafficking to get definitions and the understanding of women trafficking. So our answer that we found, firstly, we'll define what women trafficking is. So according to Cengage 2022, the trafficking of women is an international commercial activity. So to our answer to the question that was posted to us on the Moodle is that based on the knowledge we acquired from this using these different sources that we consulted to answer the matter of women trafficking, we discovered that the most obvious motivation for this type of transnational crime is to that eventuates between 2 or more different countries is because of the sex trade activities conducted in those states by criminal organizations and groups. Criminal rings are unequaled and so have no rights or support whatsoever. Therein it leads to us answering our question that this issue results into different costs to the society. The issue of women trafficking, disrupted communities and diminished social development. So the victims of these sex trafficking activities, both male and female, but in our case, we're talking about women, acquire the advice, physical and acquire physical and psychological health conditions and social disadvantages. So therefore, Williams categorizing issue of trafficking as a serious threat to individual security is because it is not only that the fact safety individuals in where comes from. So,
I think we've lost Caro. Caro is out of the meeting room, so we'll move on to our next presenter, Ms. Elias. And we'll come back to Caro later. So we'll move on to group 6. Please, Cecilia, go ahead, and I'll advise Caro that we'll come back to him while he works on resolving the issue. Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, but not that loud.
Good morning. Okay, thank you. Good morning to everyone, those on Zoom and Facebook. I'll be answering question number, our assigned question. That is question 6, which reads, what are some ways to commit a biological attack, and what are some examples of bioweapons according to Kelman? So before giving examples and listing some ways where biological attack is committed, I will look at what biological attack is and what bioweapons. So the US Department of Homeland Security defined biological attack as the intentional release of a pathogen that is disease-causing agent or biotoxin, which are poisonous substances produced by a living organism against humans, plants, or animals. So biological attack is an attack against people, could be used to cause illness, death, fear, societal disruption, and or economic damage. So for example, a biological attack, the recent one that we've seen, which is the coronavirus outbreak in Wuhan. So the first widespread of the news was that the virus originated from a virology lab just a few kilometers outside of the city of Wuhan. And it was believed that the virus was engineered as a possible biological weapon. That is according to BBC Online News article dated May 27, 2021. So what is a bioweapon? Bioweapon is also called a germ weapon. That is any of a number of disease-producing agents, such as bacteria, viruses, fungi, toxins, or other biological agents that may have been utilized as weapons, or those biological agents that have been weaponized to be used against humans, animals, or plants. So with that in mind, what are some ways to commit a biological attack according to Kelman? So in Barry Kelman's work, chapter 21, titled Emerging Dangers of Biological Weapons, in the book, the Routledge Handbook of Security Studies, which was edited by Miriam Dan Cavelty and Victor Mauer. So Kelman listed some ways to commit a biological attack. So there are countless ways to commit a biological attack, and it depends on the choice of bioweapons that is used. So bioweapons again differ in the rate of lethality, length of incubation, stability, and the ability to be treated with current vaccines and medicines. So we've identified 3 ways in which biological attacks can be committed. The first one is diseases that have been eradicated years ago. There is a high chance that scientists can recreate the virus using modern scientific techniques to make it more contagious and incurable. For example, the smallpox. It contains a virus called variola. It is lethal and contagious, and it was eradicated years ago. However, there is a high chance that the virus can be recreated using what they called the modern genetic engineering technique today. So it can be recreated, and it can make that virus more contagious and So also another example will be the hemorrhagic fever virus, such as the Ebola. These are extremely lethal and there is no cure that exists for them. So the virus kills much faster and can cause a global pandemic. But with the emerging genetic manipulation techniques today, it can make the Ebola virus kill much slowly, allowing it to spread far and wide. The second way in which a biological attack can be committed is through bacteria. So the bacteria can be spread when it is released into the atmosphere or can be put into water or food, causing widespread sickness and leads to death. So for instance, the anthrax. Anthrax is a virus. So in 2001, there was a bioterror attack that occurred in the US where powdered anthrax spores were put into letters that was mailed through the US postal system, which resulted in 22 people who fell sick, and out of the 22, 5 of them died. So that's then the second way in which a biological attack can be committed. And the third one is by contamination of livestock or food supplies that can be seen as an easy way to trigger widespread disruption and cripple the economy. So what are some examples of bioweapons as according to Kelman? So from the three ways that I've stated in which how biological attack can be committed, some examples of bioweapons are anthrax, variola virus, hemorrhagic fever virus, smallpox, plague or tularemia, which is commonly known as the rabbit fever. So these are the weapons. These are diseases and sicknesses that can be altered, recreated, or resynthesized using new advanced scientific techniques to be more contagious and incurable. So not only it can be, not only it affects the human population, but also the livestock, the animals, and plants as well. So yes, thank you. This is our answer to the given question.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Elias. Very, very interesting presentation. It's scary. Do we, as a country, have the capacity to deal with bioweapons? Is NACIA prepared? Do they have the scientists in place and the operational procedures and processes to manage this type of attack if it does happen in PNG? So that's something for future policy makers to think about and ponder on, come up with strategies and policies. We'll move on to our final presenter representing Group 7, Ms. Tema Elliott will conclude our presentation. And I'm sorry, but Caro is missing in action. He has not re-entered the meeting room. So we listen to Tema while we give time to Caro to rejoin the meeting room. If he's still not ready or not in the meeting room, then we'll conclude the presentation. Sorry, Tema, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? Okay, as the final presenter, I will be representing Group 7 on our final session, other contemporary issues, specifically biological weapons. So our allocated question was, what are the consequences and implications of biological weapons according to Kelman? So according to the book titled The Routledge Security Studies, I have gathered my answers to the questions and I will present. So this is a brief outline of my presentation. Firstly, we need to understand the difference between a biological and chemical weapon. And we look at examples, then we look at existing conventions on biological weapons, and we outline the consequences and implications of biological weapons. So the difference between a chemical and biological weapon, simply as already stated, chemical weapons are often referred to as gases. They suffocate the victim and cause massive burning. They can react at a faster rate and they are recurring. An example of this is the post-World War use of chemical weapons that occurred during the Iraq-Iran War in 1982, 1988. Now, to biological weapons, Kelman 2010 defines biological weapons as devices for the malevolent infliction of disease. Using biological weapons, a small group of haters can spread illness, perhaps at catastrophic levels, and on a global scale, of course. So as Cecilia went through, biological weapons or biological warfare can be referred to as germ warfare, and she outlined the definition very well. So basically, biological weapons are defined as biological organisms or substances derived directly from living organisms that can be used to cause death or injury to humans, animals, or plants. Mind you that biological weapons are not just limited to people, they also include plants and animals as well. So these are examples of what they actually look like. We have anthrax, a common bioweapon that is used in many wars. So the use of bioweapons in history, the Black Death pandemic, a bubonic plague. Bubonic simply means that you have swelling, especially where your lymph nodes are, that occurred in the Afro-Eurasian continent from the 1346 to 1345. It is the most fatal pandemic recorded in human history, causing a death of 75 to 200 million people. And then at present, we have the COVID-19 pandemic that was recently we have experienced. However, that is very much still under debate whether it is a bioweapon or not. So biological weapon conventions. So for this, we have the 1925 Geneva Protocol that banned the use of biological and chemical weapons in war. And then we have the Biological Weapons Convention that was also signed in 1972. So under both these conventions or treaties, member states are prohibited from using biological weapons in warfare and from developing, testing, producing, stockpiling, or deploying them. However, presently today, there's been more pursuit of biological weapons, but that information is not readily available to not clearly put out there. So why would countries want to pursue biological weapons? Gradwell 2017 explains that the knowledge, materials, and technologies needed to make and use a biological weapon are readily accessible. Of course, in an era that is we live in an era that is globalized, so the ideas that we share, it's out there. So this is easy to do. And also pathogens, they're just everywhere in nature and can be found in hospitals, research laboratories. So biological weapons are easier to pursue. In addition, that some deranged individual or terrorist organization will manufacture or steal biological weapons, that is a growing security concern. So there have been assumptions that the Al-Qaeda is involved in this also. So on to the consequences of the use of bioweapons. So this is from me personally, and I agree with Dudley and Woodford 2002, potential effects of biological weapons on biological diversity. We have biodisease outbreaks that could cause the extinction of endangered species, erosion of genetic diversity, loss of diversity, especially plants, animals, our traditional lifestyles, livelihood, and cultures, and the list goes on. The implications. So going through the question and readings, I've identified that, especially with relation to the protocols, the 1925 Geneva Protocol and the Biological Weapons Convention, there are loopholes that need to be addressed, such as the state compliance mechanisms. These have been are not outlined clearly within the protocols. That's why it is hard for bodies like the UN, who the Geneva Protocol comes under, to actually follow up and enforce to ensure that biological weapons are not being used. So the 1925 Geneva Protocol stressed that weapons can be, the use of biological weapons are banned. However, the production and deployment, shipment wherever was not banned. So there's like a lot of loopholes. So all from this, I gather that ineffective monitoring and regulation can lead to mass productions of, Kelman agrees, offensive weapons, and even use these weapons in the near future for war. So according to Kelman, 2010, his idea of consequences and implications of bioweapons, compared with chemical weapons, the death toll for bioweapon attack would be huge. That depends on the type of pathogen and how sophisticated the developer is. So when you compare even with chemical weapons or nuclear weapons, casualties in the case of biological weapons would be more higher. The second point that we see is contagion. That is a biological characteristic that is present only in bioweapons. So it allows these weapons to replicate themselves. They're actually like living organisms. So they replicate themselves and they spread. Hence, the effects can be felt and spread far wide when you compare it to nuclear. So people immediately become carriers and spread the disease. That's how it gets spread so fast. And finally, instilling fear. That's like the motive probably behind every terrorist group or organization that wants to take over a government. It would result in a political, social, economic, and dire health consequences that would cause the people to question the existing government. And then it can become a matter of national security where people don't trust the government. There can be outbreaks of war with interesting conflicts, civil wars, and yeah, a lot more issues can come out because of this. So in conclusion, the importance of funding and resources need to be made available for research purposes. Right now, I do not see any future if we try to stop biological weapons from being produced. I don't think it would actually work. So the importance of funding and resources made available for research purposes is to ensure that nations can involve themselves into developing their own bioweapons as a means to defend themselves. Also, loopholes within the Geneva Protocol and the Bioweapons Convention need to be addressed. That is specifically state compliance mechanisms, how you can get states to comply, because that is lacking. And number three, this may take long, but to develop tracking technique or resources or institutions to enable security institutions to track and identify which or who are the bioweapon sources, or where do these people, who are the sources of these bioweapons or creators. Thank you, viewers on Zoom and Facebook. And this brings us to the end of my presentation. I hope you all learned something. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tama, for a very thought-provoking presentation. And then if you go to Facebook, you'll see the post made by Jamie. He said, what if they inject a bioweapon or some kind of bacteria into betel nut, and then we chew and we spit, and then it will it will spread to other human beings, and all of us will be sick at the same time. Yeah, that's one possibility, and it's worrying. We don't have the security organizations to address such issues, especially our intelligence. We have no spies working overseas to watch what America is doing, Australia is doing, New Zealand is doing. Are they producing bio weapons in their labs in the universities and medical facilities? And will they use it on PNG? These are things that, the possibilities that might happen in the future, but we don't have the right organizations, and our national intelligence organization is ineffective. So that's a big major worry, and something for you future leaders and policy makers to consider. Mr. Taudi Veve is back online, so let's listen to Caro before we conclude. Caro, please. Oh, it goes well this time. The floor is yours, Caro.
Okay, sorry for the technical inconvenience that happened a few minutes ago. I'll go back to the question, to the answer of our group to the question. So the question that was posted to us for this week, week 13, is why did Williams label the trafficking of women as the most serious threat to individual security? Okay, so for our answer, we tried looking for the required reading. We couldn't find the required reading that was written by Williams. So we searched other sources for the information that we needed to answer the question. So this is what we found out from the other sources regarding women trafficking. So a definition that was given to us by Cengage 2022 is that women trafficking means trafficking of women as an international commercial activity in which force, coercion, and fraud are used to transport women and children across international boundaries for economic gain. So to our answer to the question that was posted to us on the Moodle is that based on the knowledge we acquired from these different sources that we consulted to answer the matter of women trafficking, we discovered that the most obvious motivation for this type of transnational crime to eventuate between two or more different countries is because of the sex trade activities that are conducted in those states by criminal organizations and groups. So women who are traded in such criminal rings are unequaled and so have no rights or support whatsoever. Therein leads us to answering our question, that is that this issue results into these different costs to society, in which includes such things as the degradation of human and women rights, particularly poor public health, disrupted communities, and diminished social development. And so the victims of sex trafficking, both male and female, but in this case female, acquire adverse physical and psychological health conditions and social disadvantages. So therefore, Williams categorizing of the issue of women trafficking as a serious threat to individual security is because the issue not only does it affect the female victim involved, but the entire safety of individuals within the community where the victim comes from. So this is our answer to the question that that was given to us on Moodle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Caro, for coming back and making an attempt to still present your answer, even though you were your presentation was affected by the network. And just to add on to what you have shared with us, it's a really serious issue, trafficking of women across borders. So currently in PNG, brothels, it's illegal to run and operate a brothel. It's illegal, but in the future, as we move and become a more advanced democracy, we might allow that freedom, legalize prostitution and the operation of brothels. And if we do that, then we might see an influx of foreign female sex workers being trafficked across international borders from Russia, from Ukraine, or from Latin American countries, from China, Asia. Currently, we have Asian sex workers in Port Moresby, as per the newspaper reports from last year. Onwards, you'll see that there's one particular club in Moresby, and they have female Asian hostess. So you go there and you pay a good amount, and they entertain you. So that's something that is already happening. And if we legalize prostitution and brothels, then we might see an increase. So that's something for us to think about. All right, thank you all our presenters for today. Sorry, we've gone a bit over time, and we have 2 minutes remaining. It's 11:28, so you have from 11:30 to 12:30 to post your comments and your questions on Moodle in our respective discussion forum. But once again, I thank Deborah, Caro, Tema, also Cecilia, for sharing with us your answers and for representing your respective groups. So this brings us to the end of our online seminar, Zoom seminar. So I thank those on Facebook and those of you who joined the meeting room, who entered the meeting room this morning. And that is the end of our seminar presentation. Next week, we move on to our social media awareness campaign. So I wish all of you the best, and I will add up your tally and give your marks out of 6. I'll enter your marks into your grade book, so you see your total out of 30%, hopefully by end of this week. All right, so that's all of you have a good day, and tomorrow we have our Korea Expo. Don't forget to join us on Facebook or come to SPBA and witness the presentations that will be done by different individuals. Okay, so you all have a good day. Thank you for joining. Those on Facebook, I noticed some really interesting comments happening on Facebook. Good commenting. Please go and join the commentary as well, and don't forget to comment on our discussion forum. Okay, bye now.